The internet has absolutely been buzzing for the last several days because an arrest was made in the Idaho case of the 4 students who were brutally murdered. 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger was arrested and charged with the murder of the 4 students. But as I said, everybody has questions out there and the internet is buzzing. People are wondering, of course, what was his motive? Did he have any connection to these 4 students? How did he evade police for so long? There are so many questions on everybody's mind. And with that, there's also a ton of information actually out there. Some official, some not official, and some that is just outright a little crazy and kind of a circus in my opinion. People making fake accounts, people making fake posts that are said to have come from him. So much out there that it's really hard to decipher what's real, what's not, what's rumor, what's reality. So today we're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about everything we know in the case up until this point. We're going to talk about what we know about Bryan, who he is, things he has said, things he has done, his history, his possible connections. We're going to go over everything today. So buckle up, it's going to be a long one. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life. Do me a favor, pause this really quick to smash that like button, smash the subscribe button, and let's get into it.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
Finally, after 47 days, the Moscow Police Department have their suspect in custody in the brutal slayings of Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, and Maddie. If you thought that a college student committed this heinous crime, you were right. But it was someone that nobody had named or even suspected. Bryan Kohberger has now been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder along with a felony burglary charge. The felony burglary charge is for committing a felony after breaking into the home. We've been told through the media by legal correspondents and even some ex-law enforcement officers that a crime like this would be incredibly difficult to go through the evidence process and accurately identify a perp. So I am just so glad that the victims' families now have a pathway to justice set in motion, and I'm especially glad that they got the news before the new year. Although it will never bring their loved ones back and nothing will ever probably feel just again, hopefully they will get answers along the way and comfort in knowing that the person responsible, if convicted, will never see the light of day again. If you saw my last video, I went over my belief that the killer was not somebody close to the victims at all, and maybe somebody that the victims didn't know, but possibly that the killer knew of them instead. And I believed that we could be looking for some random sick, sadistic killer psychopath who wasn't doing the worst job evading the police at that point. And I couldn't believe it when literally the very next day after I posted that video, I saw the news. I was shook, as was pretty much the entire country. Nobody expected it, guys. Nobody did. So we were all wondering, who the hell is this guy? And why did he do this? What was his motive? Did he know the victims? Was this planned? Has he committed crimes like this before? Just so many questions. So we're going over everything we know so far. But before we do, I want to clarify here that Bryan has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. And right now, with the way that the criminal justice system works, he is presumed innocent and all of the murder charges are all alleged. So I have to say that, guys. You know I gotta cover my ass here. So anything I say in this video acknowledges that. And any speculation that I make is my own opinion. So as always, do your own research and let me know your thoughts on this case and some of the theories that I share with you too in the comments below, because at the very end here, guys, I'm gonna just kind of be completely transparent and honest and tell you what I really think is up with this case. So stick around if you want to hear that. Otherwise, if you're like, no, hi, Annie, I actually don't care at all what you think, no problem. Listen to this whole update and then you can close out at that point. But I am going to share it with you at the end because it's my channel and I've got some opinions and I'm going to share them. So in addition to my theory, I'm going to share some information that I received from an inside source, which I absolutely hate saying that, but it's true. It's an inside source. Someone who is very, very, very close to me, who I trust wholeheartedly, is friends with somebody who is very close to this investigation. Now, this person shared text screenshots with me that have quite a few upsetting details about the case and some pretty gruesome and graphic details as well. What was shared and these details match back to what Kaylee's dad Steve had said about his concern with the police not sharing that there was a sadistic killer out on the loose and how this was so gruesome and how the public needs to be warned. These details now give that statement much more context, because when we first heard him say that, we didn't really know what he was talking about. We're like, well, why is he so certain that this person is a sadistic killer? Is there something at the crime scene that led him to believe that he knows about that the public doesn't know about? This now gives that a lot more context. While I can't share the screenshot of this text directly on the screen with you because it will be way too obvious who this person is based on their text, and I definitely don't want them getting in trouble, I am going to read you the message. So we will get to that after we go through everything with Bryan, the extradition hearing, everything we know so far. We'll come back and, revisit this. So who the heck is Bryan? Bryan is a 28-year-old man who grew up in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. He has 2 siblings and his parents are involved in his life. Bryan graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in criminal justice from DeSales University in Pennsylvania. At the time of his arrest, Bryan was a PhD criminology student and a teaching assistant at Washington State University's Pullman campus, which is only about a 15-minute drive from Moscow. Bryan was arrested at his parents' home in Chestnut Hill Township, Pennsylvania, near the Poconos, where he had been staying, and the arrest was around 3 a.m. Friday during a SWAT raid. His parents lived in a gated community in Pennsylvania, so Bryan's dad, Michael, opened the door and was cooperative with law enforcement. And Bryan was also said to have been cooperative during all of this time. A 2015 white Elantra was also found at his parents' house and it was seized. And we know that the police had been on the hunt for this Elantra for quite some time.
I want to point out 2 things. This guy has got a master's degree in criminology. He's currently working on a PhD in criminal justice. Yet he drove the getaway car all the way and parked it outside of mommy's house? Are you kidding me?
Apparently, Bryan's parents were shocked and horrified and said that this isn't anything like him, which I think any parent would say, and doesn't really mean that there weren't signs, but that's what they were saying. And don't worry, we are going to go much deeper into his background here shortly. So he was taken to Monroe County Jail and is awaiting extradition to Idaho, which his extradition hearing has taken place, and we're going to talk about that in a second too. When the Moscow Police Department held a press conference on Friday, December 30th to announce the news, they weren't able to really give us much information other than the arrest, and that was because of Idaho laws. Bryan has to be in custody in Idaho before his arrest warrant will be made public. Even though the press conference didn't say much, though, it seemed like the police chief and the DA knew how much everyone wanted more information. And it seemed like they really were going to release what they could when they could, and they just asked for patience. They said that they couldn't talk about the motive and that they still had not found the murder weapon. They added that the next part of the investigation would be focused on figuring out everything that they could about Bryan. Now, over the course of this investigation, the Moscow Police Department has received criticism from Kaylee's family for wanting more updates and answers, which is completely understandable. They are grieving, and I get that. More than anything, the Moscow Police Department have been under fire from internet sleuths for not arresting whoever they decided to blame that day, leading to speculation that they had actually botched this investigation from the start. First it was Hoodie Guy, then it was a friend at the food truck, then it was the ex-boyfriend, then I think it was Adam, then it was a professor I heard at one point. And everybody on the internet believed that this was true. So they believed that the police weren't doing their job because those people that they believed were the suspects hadn't been arrested yet. If you've been following along, guys, you know what a circus this truly has become. So I think Moscow Police Department is probably excited for the arrest warrant to be public so that any negative opinions about their investigation can fully be laid to rest.
Just because Kohberger is in custody doesn't mean Moscow PD's work is done.
We are still investigating. We're still looking into every aspect, but we believe Kohberger is our suspect. We believe we have our man.
We got one more phase to go, and then the victory will be won.
From the start, the Moscow Police Department had asked the public to trust them and to have patience. And yes, there were times when I was even wondering how things were really going and felt bad for the families. I was crossing my fingers and toes for just a Hail Mary, and to everyone's surprise, they delivered it. They really did. If you remember, the original press release about wanting the information came out to the public on December 7th, so they've been getting closer to this ever since then. Moscow Police Department said that they are hopeful that as this information comes out over time, the community can begin to heal and start getting on track to their new version of normal, whatever that may be. The University of Idaho president spoke at this press conference recently and said again that these horrific murders and senseless loss of life of Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana will forever be a permanent scar, and that the university will continue offering counseling and the police presence will remain active as the spring semester starts back up this month. Now, going back to the despicable Bryan. While in custody, he spoke to investigators for 5 to 15 minutes. While they were talking, police asked him if he understood what was going on, and he responded by saying something to the effect of, "Yes, certainly I'm aware of what's going on. I'm 10 miles away from this." He also apparently asked police if anybody else had been arrested and had a very cold, dead stare. Personally, I think he was toying around or playing mind games in an attempt to try to assert his own power here. John Wayne Gacy said the same thing when he was arrested. "Did you arrest the others?" Which I think Bryan is probably well aware of considering his educational background, which we're going to talk more about here soon. So he was shown in this mugshot in a turtle vest to prevent him from self-harming. So I'm going to assume that he kind of lost his shit at one point during this whole booking process and that he isn't the cool, calm, and collected person that he's trying to paint himself to be. Maybe it's just protocol, but they don't put these turtle vests on just everybody. Police have confirmed that they are not looking for other suspects and that they believe Bryan is solely responsible. Bryan was assigned a public defender in Pennsylvania just to oversee the extradition process, and Bryan had asked him to relay a few statements for him. So let's go over those really quickly. Number 1, it says, and I quote, "Bryan is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. He also intends to waive his extradition hearing to expedite his transport to Idaho." Now look, if I was arrested for murder, I don't know what I would say, but Bryan doesn't even know the details of what the police have against him yet at this point. So maybe it's just me, but I would want to make sure that I wasn't caught red-handed before I made a bold statement like that. It's possible that Bryan is hoping that maybe what the police have is weak or circumstantial, and that because he has a background in criminal justice, he can somehow maneuver his way out of this. I think it's a little naive to believe that the police would get 4 first-degree murder charges put together based on nothing in general, but especially coming from someone with his background. So number 2, and I'm going to read this one verbatim. Mr. Kohberger has been accused of a very serious crime, but the American justice system cloaks him in a veil of innocence. He should be presumed innocent until proven otherwise, not tried in the court of public opinion. One should not pass a judgment about the facts of the case unless and until a fair trial at court, at which time all sides may be heard and inferences challenged. All right, so he is going all in on this one, doubling down on his innocence, which I get it. Most criminals do at first, but for this kind of crime, I don't know. These statements just kind of took me back a little bit. Like I mentioned before, this isn't his permanent public defender for the murder charges. This is just the attorney assigned to his case in Pennsylvania for the extradition hearing. I could be wrong, but I don't think that normally public defenders go out of their way to make public statements, press releases, and go around on interviews to speak for their clients, especially clients that they are only representing for a few days. Here's the attorney during one of his stops during his press tour campaign, sharing insights on Bryan.
He is very intelligent. In my hour conversation with him, that comes off. I can tell that. And he understands where we are right now.
His attorney says people should wait to pass judgment until after a fair trial.
He's doing okay. He's shocked a little bit. Obviously, he's calm right now. We don't really know much about the case.
Bryan's family later asked the public defender to release a statement from them, and I'm going to read this one for you as well. "First and foremost, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them. We will continue to let the legal process unfold, and as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. We respect privacy in this matter as our family and the family suffering loss can move forward through the legal process. Now look, I'm not going to dispute Bryan's academic intelligence. I actually think that plays a lot into his motives, but before we get there, here's what we know so far about what evidence has him tied to the crime. Sources at CNN have reported that Bryan was identified through genealogical DNA that was at the scene and digital evidence of his phone being in the area the night of the murders. Surely the DNA recovered was specific enough to identify him in the murders and not just random touch DNA, so the whole open party house won't necessarily be a factor. And I can't imagine that the police wouldn't use critical DNA for this either. Kaylee's family has reported that they believe that they have found some connection, too, between Kaylee and Bryan, but that they weren't ready to share yet what that connection was. Like I mentioned earlier, the police also took the 2015 Elantra in Pennsylvania to process for evidence. Bryan's apartment in Pullman, Washington, his office at the university, as well as his parents' house in Pennsylvania, were also searched by the police, and authorities took a substantial amount of items from the scene in brown bags. The murders took place in the early hours of November 13th, and police estimated this happened around 3 or 4 a.m. So where did Bryan go after this? Well, he went and finished out the rest of the semester of his criminology PhD like nothing ever happened. Bryan's dad then flew to Pennsylvania, and they drove back together in that Elantra from Washington to Pennsylvania. Now, Bryan's public defender has come out to say that this was a planned trip and that they had made this trip sometime between the 13th of December and the 16th of December to make sure that they would get back to Pennsylvania before the winter storm came in. And I believe that that statement was made because a lot of people were wondering if his dad drove with him across country. Was he trying to help him escape? Was he helping him cover things up? So the public defender wanted to come forward and say, hey, no, this actually has been planned for quite some time now. This was always the plan. His dad had nothing to do with it. Which, while they were on this cross-country drive, they actually got pulled over by state troopers twice, once for speeding and once for following too closely, and that footage has now been released. You can see that Bryan is the one behind the wheel. You can't see much of him in the rest of the footage, just this quick little glance as the body cam footage as the officer walks up, but you can see that this was the footage of when they were pulled over as well on their way back to Pennsylvania. Police said that they had been tracking Bryan for the 4 days prior to his arrest, just watching him until they got everything in order on the legal side of things to then make an arrest. After his identity was released, a few students from the criminology program at WSU spoke out and said that Bryan didn't act like anything had been weird at all. They said he was usually pretty quiet and kind of weird in the first place, so that they didn't notice that anything was off, not at all. One student said he seemed more upbeat, actually, and willing to carry on a conversation. And one of the classes that Bryan was in discussed the murders, and Bryan didn't act fazed either way. And that same student said, I don't believe he had any reaction. A different classmate said, he sort of creeped people out because he stared and he didn't talk much, but when he did, it was very intelligent conversation and he needed everybody to know that he was smart. Another graduate student said that the arrest of Bryan was pretty out of left field and said that he took several courses with Bryan and that Bryan was always looking for a way to fit in and would often find the most complicated way to explain something, and he always had to make sure that you knew that he knew it. A few people that knew Bryan more closely also spoke out on social media to share what they knew.
I used to go on night runs with him because I didn't want to go running at night by myself. So I would text him hey, you want to go for a run? We'd go for 6-7 mile runs at night. So when I saw who it was, I was just in complete shock. I'm still kind of shaking knowing about that. It's just unreal to think somebody could actually do that to somebody. It's absolutely mind-boggling. My adrenaline's still kind of running after finding that information out. So just I feel for the families, and I'm just happy justice can be served now. So.
I'm sorry, can you imagine running with someone specifically because of a killer on the loose and you're actually running with the killer? There were a few TikTok videos from a girl who knew Bryan back in high school, which have all been now removed by her. She posted a few new videos since, and I'm just going to share a few clips, but you can watch all of her videos on TikTok if you want.
Okay, I'm just gonna jump right into it. I had to write myself a flashcard with 1,000,001 questions. Number one, why did I take the video down? Again, out of respect for my friends. I was in shock. I posted the video without thinking. I didn't blur out faces. I didn't blur out names. I just wanted to get how I knew him out there. But yeah, I took it down. I know the internet is forever. I know it's now circulating and it's everywhere. And I just respectfully asked if you see it, just to get them to take it down or at least blur their names and their faces. Yeah, because I talked to my friends and they don't want anything up. I'm not going to be reposting, even with blurred faces. It's out there. If you've seen it, you've seen it. Number two, why did I post without asking them? Again, I was in shock. I didn't. It was the last thing on my mind. I was friends with him. And that's that. Number three, what does his character from 5 to 10 years ago have to do with him now? It could mean nothing. But again, someone's character 5 to 10 years ago, I mean, it could help in some type of way. If not, who knows? Like I said, he was on heroin in high school. He seemed to have gotten clean. That's who I knew him as. There are people who know him now that will have better answers than I do. That's just how it is. Number four, did I report to the tip line? Yes. The constant comments saying that I shouldn't have posted a TikTok and should have just went to the tip line, I did. I called, my mom called, my brother called, they gave their statements.
In addition to being a bully, the brother also said that Bryan would make him feel bad, would mock his intelligence as a way to make himself feel better. Other people that went to high school with Bryan told Fox News that Bryan was mocked by classmates for being socially awkward and for being overweight, and that some girls would actually throw things at him. And then at some point before his senior year of high school, Bryan lost a lot of weight and turned into a very aggressive bully himself. Allegedly, one of his former family members, and I think it was an aunt by marriage and now they're divorced, but don't quote me on that, spoke out and said that Bryan was a vegan who had extremely bad OCD eating habits and wanted his aunt and uncle to buy new pots and pans and refused to eat anything that ever had meat cooked in them.
Get rid of their pots and pans. Oh no, the bake process in the dishwasher wasn't enough. They had to buy new pans that had never touched meat. What does that tell me? He is obsessive. He is fastidious. He's about 6 feet tall. He's socially awkward. He planned this whole thing out. Did you notice the charges? He didn't go in to steal. He didn't go in to rape anybody. He went into that home with the intent to kill. How long had he been watching these girls? And as we speak, Jason, they are tearing his Pullman apartment apart for any notes or writings, anything that can match him up to this murder, and I predict they will find it.
Before moving to Washington, Bryan visited the Seven Sirens Brewing Company near DeSales University in Pennsylvania several times, allegedly harassing the women who worked there as well as some of the customers. If the women weren't interested in his advances, there were times where he apparently got very upset. One time he called a bartender a bitch during one of his little bitch fits. Now this happened so frequently that female employees and customers complained to the manager, and Bryan was actually flagged in their ID scanning system for anybody who comes into the brewery. The warning was something along the lines of, this guy makes creepy comments, keep an eye on him, he'll have 2 or 3 beers and then just get a little bit too comfortable. One time the manager apparently even had to approach Bryan and said, "Hey Bryan, welcome back, we appreciate you coming back. I just wanted to talk to you really quick and make sure that you're going to be respectful this time and that we're not going to have any issues," which I guess Bryan acted stunned to that, being called out on his crap, and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You have me totally confused. Just playing dumb." Now, I mentioned this a little bit in one of my updates that I posted over the weekend, but Bryan's Reddit account was found online, and there was a post about a research study for ex-cons where he was asking for participants to help with an anonymous 15 to 20-minute survey for his master program at DeSales University. He also listed a couple of other students that were participating in this research. One of Bryan's former professors who taught an online class that Bryan took said that she helped him with this survey, and it was part of his thesis. But the biggest thing I'm wondering here is why this was posted after Bryan graduated. That same post was posted in 2 different Reddit threads, and the second one was dated even later than the first one. So I don't know if maybe Bryan had 1 class left and maybe the university let him go ahead and walk in May while he did a summer class. Maybe this was something additional and he was set to graduate this course in the winter. I'm not sure. I know some universities will let students do that so that they can participate in the graduation ceremony but not actually receive their degree until after. So I'm not sure. I'm just pointing out the dates here. So I took the survey. I, of course, filled out bogus information, like saying I was a 44-year-old man and had never been caught for a crime I did, all this stuff, just to kind of like go through the motions of this to see what it really is. But I went through it and had to choose answers to move forward in this survey. Now, there are a lot of questions on this survey, and I'm sure you've seen them on the internet, but I'm going to just read a couple to you that stood out to me. Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling. Why did you choose that victim or target over others? Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your home? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this point. Now, those are just a couple of the questions in this survey, and overall, it's pretty unsettling. While I understand that it may have been for his thesis and some people are saying it's normal, other people at the university are saying that this isn't necessarily normal, especially for the dates that it was posted in these ex-convict prison threads on Reddit that were dated after this would have been worked on, which again, I don't go to that school, so I don't know the dates that things were due, but something about this just didn't really feel right. It almost felt to me like he was trying to create a blueprint for a crime or trying to not lure other people into the crime, but trying to make sure that he in his mind, even though he believes he's so smart, had all of his bases covered. I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. Also, I think it could have been trying to understand or justify his own thoughts that maybe he was internally struggling with. Asking, how did you pick that target over others? What were you feeling as you planned the crime? Almost as though if he got the answers from these convicts, it would give himself some form of validation as to what he was feeling. I don't know. There's just something tugging at me that doesn't feel right here. So again, this could very well be some sort of school study, and I could be completely wrong here, but I just can't deny that all of this, to me, appears like Bryan was attempting to map out a blueprint to commit a perfect crime. Or maybe he was so curious about what it would feel like that he almost wanted to live vicariously through the responses. Bryan's email was the only email listed for contact information on this post as well. None of the other students that were allegedly taking place in this research study had their email addresses listed. Is it possible that maybe the study was for both academic purposes at first, but then later spread on social media for his own personal curiosity? Was he thinking about this or fantasizing about committing the murders since last summer when it was posted? Was he hoping that the answers from others would maybe satisfy some of his sick urges, and then it actually did the opposite and catapulted him forward to commit the crimes? Or was this an attempt to learn from mistakes of other criminals, to become an expert at this? Is he a psychopath or sociopath that doesn't feel emotions and wondering what the real emotions would feel like, almost like a form of mimicking their behavior? So is that why he said, did anybody else get arrested, and made those statements through his public defender? Because is that what he thinks normal people do? I don't know. It has me very confused. This is a very different kind of case than we usually see. Some criminal psychologists have said that Bryan could have very well chosen his area of study to figure himself out, or why he feels like this, or maybe even if he had a sinister motive to perfect his craft. Either way, it's very rare that somebody studying in a field at the PhD level is actually a psychopathic budding serial killer. But it does make sense that Bryan was into that just from what we know so far about the crime. A former FBI profiler recently discussed this as well, and here's what she had to say.
There may be 2 faces here. Someone that is academically very well educated and prepared those questions in a survey. So there's an academic interest in what happens when someone is committing a crime. And then you have their own interests, their personal interests. Again, if he's found responsible for having committed the crime. So there may be a merging of the 2 there where both of those will contribute to the motivations, the academic interest, but also the personal violent ideation that would have preceded the academic pursuit as a PhD student.
Dr. Catherine Ramsland is a professor of forensic psychology and criminal justice and an expert in serial killers at DeSales University, where Bryan went. She has written 60 books and more than 1,000 articles about crime, forensic science, and the supernatural. Some of her most famous books include How to Catch a Killer, Hunting and Capturing the World's Most Notorious Serial Killers, and a book called Inside the Minds of Serial Killers and Why They Kill. Bryan took a class from Catherine while studying at DeSales. Law and Crime reached out to Dr. Ramsland about this case, and she replied that she cannot make media statements about him at this time. However, one of the reporters from Law and Crime said she spoke to one of the students who took the class with Bryan, and the student told her that Bryan often interrupted Dr. Ramsland and would often talk over her, as if he knew more about the subject than she did, the person teaching it. Feels a little narcissistic, right? Little ego trip, power control, not good. Now, if that's true, I think it's absolutely possible that Bryan thinks he is smarter than the police and can somehow manipulate the situation to be in his favor. I theorized in the past that the killer had to be pretty bold and brazen to go into a house and butcher 4 people and leave. And his behavior toward a literal expert in the field, if true, totally makes sense.
One of the most disturbing aspects of Bryan Kohberger's past is what he was studying, criminology, and who he was studying under at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a serial killer expert who had a close relationship with serial killer BTK, even writing his autobiography.
What did you first think when you heard that Dr. Ramsland was teaching Bryan Kohberger?
Personally, my first reaction was just like my stomach churned, and I literally physically got ill, knowing that there was now a connection back to Ramsland and she connects to my father. It was just a lot.
Carrie Rawson is serial killer Dennis Rader, aka BTK's daughter. BTK stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, and Rader is responsible for killing 10 people.
Do you think he may have had any sort of communication with your father?
Kohberger could definitely have had communication with my father. Well, obviously we know he studied my father in criminology classes. He probably studied him heavier since he had Ramsland as a professor. But we need to find out if there's a deeper connection. It concerns me.
A deeper connection, like if Kohberger was corresponding with BTK in prison. He would have had access because of his professor, Dr. Ramsland, who's appeared in more than 200 crime documentaries and was even on News Nation in October discussing the Delphi case.
Help explain to me the mindset of a killer living in a community where they have carried out, allegedly, this heinous act.
Well, if it is the person, the suspect that they have under arrest right now, he was married, so he would have had to have secrets.
Dr. Ramsland is known for her TV appearances, but she's not talking now. When I asked her about Kohberger, she responded, "I cannot make media statements about him at this time." For Carrie Rawson, the nightmare in Idaho has now come full circle.
I want to figure out how to stop it. Like, it's hard to be the kid of this guy and live with this, and then see somebody else go do this and wonder, did your dad influence him? Did your dad talk to him? Like, was he studying my father outside of academics? I mean, am I ever going to get answers to that? I don't know.
Could you imagine if he really does have ties to BTK and was in communication with him? I mean, holy crap. And here's just a little interesting fact. Just nibble on this for a second. God, I hate that word nibble. But, I don't want to say suck on this, but you get what I'm saying. BTK was 28 years old and killed 4 people in his first crime. 28 years old and killed 4 people in his first crime. Seriously, Google it. Kind of weird, right? BTK had also been described in the media as the Boy Scout troop leader, president of his church congregation, as well as a loving husband and a doting father. He seemed to be reliable, a responsible man to everybody who knew him, but he was leading a double life. Sounds very familiar to what we know about Bryan, does it not? So I'm wondering if he ever reached out to other serial killers in prison. Because on the surface, it wouldn't be that weird because of his academic studies, but it's definitely interesting to think about. Or what if he was trying to impress Dr. Ramsland? I wonder if she could draw a confession out of Bryan, or if he's intellectually arrogant enough that he believes he learned all he could and thought he could do it better than BTK. So I'm just speculating here, of course, guys. That's just kind of, me talking out loud here. On Sunday, the New York Post put out a very interesting article. And the source of this article is a quote-unquote good friend of somebody connected to the case. None of the information in this article has been confirmed by Moscow Police Department. And I'm not sure what to think of this, so please take this with a grain of salt and do your own research. The criminology student accused of slaying 4 University of Idaho students had stalked his alleged victims before the November murders and wore gloves in a supermarket weeks afterwards, according to a new report. Cell phone data shows that Bryan Kohberger was often in the same location as the 3 sorority sisters and one of their boyfriends before he allegedly slashed them to death as they apparently slept at an off-campus house. And this says it's a source close to one of the case investigators who told the Daily Mail. Kohberger also seemed to be very careful about not leaving his fingerprints in public, even as he fled to his native state of Pennsylvania in recent days. He's not stupid and has been very careful, said the source, who claimed to be good friends with one of the cops who had surveilled the murder suspect in the days before his arrest. It goes on to say, he followed him into a giant Pennsylvania grocery store chain and wore gloves the entire time. Not sure if they ever interacted, but his cell phone pings followed their every move for weeks. Later, the Daily Mail also picked it up, but it's from that same anonymous source of a leaked text message, which again is not verified at all and could be somebody making it up. When the arrest warrant comes out, we will have a much clearer picture on everything. But if that's true, that's extremely damning for Bryan. I don't understand continuing to wear gloves at a grocery store to not leave fingerprints if you wore gloves at the crime scene. So I'm not sure what the intent there was. Where did he think his fingerprints were going to be found? On the other hand, if he didn't wear gloves, I'm surprised he wasn't more concerned that he'd be found out, and his eagerness to be exonerated makes zero sense. Throughout the time I've been covering this case, I've seen several posts by people claiming to have some type of inside knowledge. And what's interesting is that while nobody mentioned anything like that article said, they have said some similar things, like describing how horrific the scene really was, that it was a random psycho, and that when everything comes out, the public will be disgusted and disturbed. I didn't pay much attention to those claims at the time because people make stuff up like that all the time. But now, it seems like that may actually be more true than not. I don't know, that's just my opinion only. I've seen some rumblings that maybe Bryan was using other screen names or profiles on Reddit, Facebook, to join some of these case discussion groups and possibly even call in on a YouTube channel. Bryan's friend from high school also spoke out on TikTok about this.
All right, jumping back in, I don't know what number I'm on, but the video of the caller on the podcast, I believe that's him. It sounds exactly like him in my opinion. I sent it to my brother. He said that Bryan usually spoke with more clarity and certainty. So he can't be 100% sure if he believes that's him, but I think it sounds exactly like him. And then regarding of the video of the relative who posted with the reflection of them in their laptop, Josco, I think was the name. I don't think that sounds like him. I must have watched that video 100 times over, and I cannot seem to focus on anything in the reflection that will give it away. I don't think it sounds like him either. But again, my brain is mush right now, so it could be, it couldn't be, but I really, honest to God, don't think it sounds like him.
Labar told NBC on Sunday Kohberger could be back in Idaho as soon as Tuesday night or early Wednesday. He says Kohberger is well aware of the various stories about him circulating online.
I am giving him updates. I spoke to him this morning for an hour, last night for 20 minutes, really updating him on some of the allegations that are coming out, but mainly allegations that have nothing to do with the facts and evidence in the case, but really the cross-country trip. Just to clarify those type of facts as to why he ended up in Pennsylvania and whether or not he was in Pullman at the time of the homicides.
Honestly, it doesn't change anything, even if it was him. He's already been arrested. It's weird, but it's not surprising to me at all that someone like that would be so arrogant to insert himself into a case discussion group to try to be some sort of freak and just relish in on it. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely sickening if it's true, but I think it's almost expected. Richard Allen in the Delphi case did the same thing. We also know that more times than not, when there's any sort of vigil that's being held or a funeral, if it's an unsolved homicide, that the perpetrator will more times than not show up to that place, almost as a way to insert themselves in the investigation, be aware of everything that's going on. So it's not a far stretch to think he would join a Facebook group as well. Certainly not. Now, this is all speculation here. Let me be clear. But if we were to believe everything that Bryan's classmates and past acquaintances said about him, he fits the exact profile of someone who would do this crime. I know that one of the things a lot of people have been stuck on is saying how personal the crime was and how it has to be someone that the victims knew. But when you think about it, those observations are all for normal people. A crime carried out by an aggressive, unhinged psychopath who planned this all out, who gets a sense of pleasure to carry something like this out, that's extremely personal to a killer and would make sense of why it would look like something out of rage or passion or super personal. Now, we know that the girls weren't sexually attacked, but I've also heard that sometimes a knife represents something sexual to a killer, and that a knife can be a form of sexual satisfaction in the same way that sex is to these types of people. I know it's disgusting, but that's what a lot of criminal psychologists have theorized. It's happened in past cases where it's almost as though they use this weapon as though it's, an appendage of their body, if you get what I'm saying, and that they receive pleasure that way. It's very, very weird. We all know what a phantom limb is, or when you feel phantom pain, maybe it's like phantom penis. I don't know, guys. So Bryan's attorney has spoke out again about their conversations while he has been arrested.
What's his mood like? Has anything changed?
Not really. He still has a very calm demeanor, asking questions about the hearing, seeing how his family is, making sure they're getting through this as best they can. He obviously has concerns for them, and really he's a little ashamed that they have to go through this process.
What's he ashamed of?
I think just putting his family through this, whether it's right or wrong or how it plays out.
Is he revealing anything about a connection to any of the victims?
No, and I have not questioned him about the facts and evidence. Not being privy to any of that information, I don't really want to elicit any of that information. So he's not offering it because I'm not asking it.
Okay, I see. Well, I'm kind of curious, and I know you may not, I don't know if you can answer this, but there have been reports or questions about whether or not he was following at least one of those victims. Have you seen that, or what do you think about that?
Again, I take it with a grain of salt reading what I do online, and I'd really wait until the affidavit of probable cause is released to mention anything. I don't want to make any type of assumptions. I don't want to guess. I wouldn't comment on it until I've had the opportunity to read the affidavit of probable cause and look at the evidence.
Okay. Do you have a gut feeling about whether or not he did this?
I do not. Really, my interactions with him are solely based on the extradition proceedings, and I wouldn't want to judge someone's character based solely on that.
While in custody at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania, according to one of the guards, he has been on the ground facing the wall and not talking.
I did confirm with the Pennsylvania court system that there still will be that procedural hearing on Tuesday, and that will be the very first time we see him. Now, as for seeing him back in Idaho, back in Latah County, it could be up to 72 hours. So once that hearing is complete, the process and wheels will be in motion to getting him back to our area so things can start moving. Now, we did learn from some reporting from CNN that the attorneys do want a psych evaluation done before things move forward in Idaho.
And Bryan is also being accommodated for his vegan diet. On Tuesday, January 3rd, Bryan Kohberger came into court and apparently as he was walking in, made eye contact with his family who was sitting in the front row. He nodded at them while his mom was crying and his sister was comforting his mom. Because of the emotion, a deputy reportedly brought over tissues for the family as well. In court, Bryan waived his extradition hearing and had to sign a waiver stating such. The judge explained to Bryan the charges that are against him in Idaho and said that he was voluntarily allowing authorities to transfer him back to Idaho by signing this waiver. Bryan acknowledged this and told the judge that he is not on any medication that would impact his decision making. So the judge said that he has to be sent back to Idaho within 10 days. Bryan pled not guilty, and it seems that he now has an attorney in Idaho by the name of Ann Taylor. The same day as this extradition hearing took place, the evidence team was seen at the house in Idaho taking photos, and Bryan's new attorney, suspected to be Ann Taylor, was there as well. Pennsylvania Police Department held a press conference shortly after the extradition hearing, and in this presser, they explained how they came to obtaining the warrants and the execution of them. Other than that, it was kind of a big nothing burger. They didn't really say much, but one of the things that was said that was interesting is the assistant DA said that one of the reasons that Bryan waived an extradition hearing was to actually expedite his transfer back to Idaho, where that sealed affidavit for his arrest could be released to his legal team. Now, I don't know how the law works with all of that, because I would assume that once he was arrested, regardless of where he was, that his legal team would have access to the evidence against him and that arrest affidavit. However, we know that something is tricky here and that it can't actually be entered into court record until Bryan is physically back in Idaho. So it does make sense that he would waive his right to the extradition hearing and get back to Idaho as fast as possible so that his legal team could see exactly what evidence they have against him so that they could start building their defense and see exactly what's going on in the case. If you can't obtain that until you physically get back to Idaho, there would be no point in being at a standstill and trying to fight that, if that makes sense. And again, I don't know the law and the inner workings of it, what related to this, so that's just my opinion based on the statements that were made. Do you think that if Bryan is the killer, he believes he committed the crime in a way that will leave him open to an acquittal? Almost like the movie with Anthony Hopkins' Fracture. It came out back in 2007. Bryan allegedly thought he was smarter than Dr. Ramsland, so it's not a huge leap to believe that he thinks he could outsmart the police. Bryan's friend from the TikToks posted a story that said, "Just spoke with an old friend of mine who was also friends with Bryan. He said he saw him last year and he was giving him bad vibes. Cut him out of his life because of this. I truly believe that if Bryan actually committed these murders, he did this to prove he could get away with it. He wanted to challenge law enforcement and intelligence. He has the background. He has studied this for years. He did this research. He wanted to experience it and see if he could get away with it. I know this is innocent until proven guilty, but what I said still stands even if he is proven innocent. What's said and done is said and done. My heart goes out to the victims' families and friends. May you find clarity and peace as you navigate this trying time." I also want to point out that not a single ex-girlfriend or any woman ever romantically involved with Bryan has come forward at any point. Which, to be fair, would they even want to? Would they want to acknowledge a tie to this person? No, I certainly wouldn't. But I can't help but think that there would be more of a social media digital trail if he had a significant other in the past, even if it was just a hookup. Which makes me wonder, is Bryan a virgin? Which I know that question will probably hurt his ego.
So, is this guy an incel? What was his motivation? And let me remind everybody, the state doesn't even have to prove motivation. But I can tell you, take a look at this guy. Would it surprise you to see him, that face staring in your bathroom window? Because it would not surprise me. And this is a death penalty state. 4 bodies equals the death penalty.
Did he ever see any of Kaylee, Maddie, or Xana and think, wow, here I am, a 28-year-old PhD student, I'm educated, I'm savvy, these women should like me, they should want to be with somebody like me, why don't they like me? How can they not see that I'm not a loser, I've changed myself, I've lost weight, I'm successful, why are they dating these loser frat guys? Because there's no denying that Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana were beautiful girls. So did they remind him of the days in high school when he was overweight and getting rejected and getting made fun of when girls used to throw things at him? Did he maybe ever casually meet these girls and he took their generally kind personality in a different way? Like maybe that they were interested in him or something even though they weren't? And then when they blew him off, he went more crazy than he did with those bartenders at the brewery? Was it possible that Bryan was jealous of Ethan since he was popular and had a pretty girlfriend, so he didn't care once he was inside the house? He was just mad at attractive college co-eds, and Ethan unfortunately happened to be there that night. Or is this a result of long-term planning of somebody who wanted to be infamous? I think it's also possible Bryan didn't expect to get caught this early, and it could be pretty embarrassing for him on the inside. He might be feeling a little bit of embarrassment. Now here's my theory. And I'm very curious to know if you agree, what parts you agree with, what parts you disagree with. But this is just my theory given the information we know so far. And I know we are going to get a lot more once we get that arrest warrant. Guys, I'm trying to see if I can get it before it's released, and it's tough. But here's my theory. I am of the mindset that Bryan committed this crime, if he did, that Bryan allegedly committed this crime, I'll put it that way, for notoriety. I believe it was ego-driven. It was to prove how smart he is. It was to say, look, anybody's capable of murder, but I'm going to show you how you can get away with it. Almost like, let me throw it in law enforcement's face that I can commit one of the most horrific crimes in recent history and get away with it, even though he's now been arrested. And what's really scary is the fact that he studied criminology. Not only because it would give him the tools of how to commit a crime, or a perfect crime, so to speak, but because it also could give him the tools on how to put up a very good defense. Wearing gloves in a grocery store. It was Pennsylvania. It was cold. They were gloves because it was snowing outside, because it was raining outside, because it was cold. That's why I was wearing the gloves. No, but they weren't snow gloves. They were latex gloves. Yeah, I was wearing gloves because it was COVID, because I'm still scared of the spread. Holidays are a popular time. I didn't want to go in public. Remember when we all were wearing gloves in grocery stores? And guys, please don't get political on here. I'm just talking as an example. Easily to explain that away, depending on where they found the DNA and the cells and, all of that goes along with it. Could he explain his DNA in the house? It was a party house. I had been there before. My sister had partied there once before, which I don't know if that's true, guys. But yeah, I had been in the house. That's why my DNA was there. Okay, sure, explain that away. It's reasonable doubt. That's the key, reasonable doubt. I own an Elantra. Of course I like that, but why? That has nothing to do with anything. They lit it up with luminol. There was no blood in there. There was no evidence in there. So what if I have that car? I wasn't in hiding. I just wasn't paying attention. I didn't know all of these things. Which, now that I say that part out loud, though, it is interesting because when he was in interrogation after the arrest, before he lawyered up, he said to police, of course I know what's going on. I live 10 miles away from where this happened, or whatever he had said. Which, so it's like, if he vocalized how aware he was of this case, then he certainly would have known that they had been looking for the Elantra. So why wouldn't he have said, hey, I have an Elantra. I just want to let you know, heads up, whatever that may be. So that's an interesting piece, which I'm just now thinking through myself. Now, in regards to the text that I mentioned earlier and that information, as I mentioned, this was somebody who is very close to me, who I trust wholeheartedly. And this person is good friends with someone very close to the investigation. So this person shared some text screenshots with me that contain some pretty horrific details that not only we haven't heard before, but that make this case make a lot more sense. And I don't want to say the case itself and why this happened, but certain details we've heard along the way, it starts to kind of tie it all together a little bit more, for me at least. I want to warn you, these details are graphic and very disturbing. Also, as always, do your own research, because until this is officially tied back to the affidavit once it's released, it is all alleged at this point. But this message says, my sister's best friend from college is married to an FBI agent. He was one of the first FBI agents allowed at the scene in Moscow. Apparently, the murderer's knife sheath was found under the body of Ethan. They were able to find DNA on the sheath and sent it to 23andMe. A cousin of the killer, aka Bryan, has done 23andMe, so they were able to somehow then link it to Bryan. That, plus a cat, happened to be taking a pee and set off a nearby Ring camera, which is where they were able to see the Hyundai Elantra, which of course the suspected killer drove. They then tracked him to Pennsylvania, where he was home on winter break with family, and agents posed as garbage men and went through the family's garbage to find DNA and confirm the DNA match. From the text message my sister received from the FBI agent, apparently it is one of the most gruesome crime scenes he's ever been a part of. Ethan's legs were sliced all the way down to the hamstrings. One of the girls was stabbed 54 times and beaten so badly that every bone in her face was broken and so sunken in that she was unrecognizable. One of the cops said that one of the girls in the basement who survived went by the staircase and she thought it was Ethan and yelled at him to shut the fuck up, but it was actually the killer. The killer then left after he saw her, but she didn't know it was him though at the time. Now obviously, a lot to unload there. Let me start by saying the details of Ethan and being sliced down to his hamstrings do match what Kaylee's dad said about this being gruesome and sadistic. Also, we know that the coroner had made those comments about it not being traditional stab wounds, but more in line with being tears and gashes. These details also explain why the police began looking for an Elantra specifically, because of that Ring camera footage. Now, you may be asking like I did, well, if Bryan saw the roommates, and if the roommate yelled out to him, why didn't he kill her too? But I think it could be for a multitude of reasons. Based on the layout of the house, which we know is odd and kind of had everybody questioning from the beginning what floor was technically which, I think that he may not have known that anybody lived on that basement level. So I think it's possible that he was spooked and fled. If it were dark and she just yelled up the staircase in the dark saying, shut up, Ethan, without truly seeing each other or making eye contact, he could have easily snuck away. I also think it's entirely possible that he was physically exhausted after brutally murdering 4 people and chose to flee rather than go downstairs and risk multiple people being down there, being caught by them, or being overpowered and killed himself, or them calling 911 and then him getting caught. I would think better to flee than to walk downstairs into a situation that is unknown if you don't know how many people are down there. And him fleeing could also explain why the knife sheath was left behind and then later found. Maybe he was in a rush and it was sloppy. The police also announced right away, very early on in all of this, the type of weapon that they were looking for, that it was a K-bar knife, or however you pronounce it. And surely you would be able to learn, based on the wounds, what kind of weapon was used. But if the sheath was left behind, that also, in my opinion, would be a very quick way to identify what kind of weapon was used. Because they identified the weapon and said that they were looking for that type of weapon almost immediately. It wasn't after any autopsies. It wasn't after anything like that. It was right away. So I would think you would have to either know on sight that that's the kind of weapon that would cause those type of wounds, or if you see the sheath that those are often stored in left behind, you would automatically know that that was the kind of weapon that was used. Like I said, I have no reason to believe that this person would lie or fabricate things, as they are the least dramatic person I know, don't follow true crime, haven't been following any of the craziness in this case, but please make a judgment yourself. I also think that the stab wound number being 54 is very specific. It's a very detailed, specific number to give and to provide. And with so much of the conversation in the beginning of this case and still being that the wounds were not equal and that this appeared targeted, that also would make a lot of sense. So again, make a judgment yourself, and this is all technically alleged until it is tied back to the official affidavit, but I wanted to share this information with you. I just received it this morning, and I always will try to be transparent with you. So anyways, this case is crazy. One thing for sure is that I'm going to be on pins and needles until this arrest warrant is released, so that we can have a better picture of some of the evidence against him. And of course, I will have another video once that comes out so we can go over everything. But I want to know what you think and why. Do you think that this was planned and the targets could have been anybody, but that it was planned because he wanted to get away with the crime, because he wanted to prove how intelligent he is, and that this was something of an ego stroke to him? Or do you think it was a crime that happened because of rejection he faced from one or more of the girls? Was it because he just is a psychopath serial killer and gets off on murdering people, and maybe this wasn't even his first round of victims? What do you think and why, given the information we know so far? So like I said, guys, I'm going to keep you updated on everything as it unfolds. I may not always be the first to jump on here with these quick little bite-sized videos with all of the late breaking news and updates and rumors, but it's because I'm trying to consume all of the information to make an assessment, to figure out what's real, what's not, so that I can then put out a longer video where it has kind of, a comprehensive overview. So I promise I am following this case very, very closely, and I am going to be keeping you updated all along the way. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in today. Also, if you want to stay up to date on updates as they're happening in real time, I'm always uploading on my Instagram stories, where that's kind of just a faster platform for me to push out these updates rather than jump on YouTube. So make sure you're following along there. It's @_AnnieElise. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in. Please don't forget, give this video a like on your way out and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, so that you'll be notified of the new updates as I post them. All right, guys, until the next one, stay safe. Bye.